crows are very smart, like clever. They play games. They know how to solve puzzles.
They don't think of a crow as being a songbird. They don't sing a pretty song. And they use this to their own, in their own ways to communicate among their lifelong mates.
The age of AI is upon us, and it's set to change everything we know about the world. For decades, humans have assumed that we are the only species capable of complex thought, long-term memory, and creating cultures. But artificial intelligence is about to shatter that illusion in more ways than one. If you ask scientists today which animal can come the closest to humans in terms of communication and strategy, you'd expect them to say monkeys or apes. But the truth is, primates might not even be in the running anymore. Researchers recently fed thousands of hours of crow recordings into a next-generation AI system, expecting simple patterns like alarm calls, food signals, and basic chatter. Instead, what the machine uncovered didn't resemble bird behavior at all. The evolution of crows. To understand what AI uncovered, we need to step back and look at what scientists already knew. Because for decades, crow communication wasn't taken seriously. Their calls were categorized as simple signals amongst their own, but the AI analysis revealed something else entirely. Humans dominate crow conversations. They don't talk to each other about deadly predators or rival birds. In fact, they talk about us. Crows belong to the corvid family, alongside ravens, magpies, jays, and scientists casually refer to them as the feathered apes. That nickname isn't an exaggeration, though. For the longest time, humans thought only primates made tools. Then Jane Goodall famously discovered chimps using sticks to fish for termites in the 1960s. That shattered the belief that tool-making was uniquely human, but we still didn't think birds came anywhere close. After all, birds don't have a cerebral cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex thought. So for decades, researchers assumed birds couldn't do higher reasoning. But new research has flipped that idea upside down. Birds have something else, a highly developed pallium, and it turns out this structure performs many of the same functions as the cortex. Crow brains are tiny in general, but relative to their body size, almost resembles the proportions of an ape. And the firing patterns that lit up during problem-solving were nearly identical to those found in primates working through puzzles. And this isn't new. The signs have been there for years. In fact, the evidence has been overwhelming. Long before AI ever touched their recordings, researchers noticed that crows interpret human behavior with shocking precision. And this wasn't just because they wanted to avoid danger. A recent research study at the University of Washington showed that crows are able to recognize humans even years after their first encounter with them. To experiment, researchers trapped just 7 crows while wearing a dangerous mask. Years later, when those same masks were worn on campus again, the reaction was unbelievable. Dozens of crows that had never even seen the trapping incident still recognized the mask as a threat. 7 birds were trapped, and somehow the entire crow neighborhood knew the story. That tells us how crows aren't just reacting to human actions, they are being impacted by it and spreading it like wildfire. It doesn't just stop there, though. Years later, when the man behind the initial experiment, John Marsluff, walked across campus wearing the same dangerous mask, 47 out of 53 crows scolded him aggressively. These weren't the original birds. In fact, many wouldn't even have been alive during the first trapping. So it's obvious that the story was passed down from generation to generation. It also goes to show that crows can and will hold a grudge for up to 17 years. That alone tells us how dangerous these birds can prove to be in the future. However, in 2023, nearly 2 decades after the first experiment, the crows weren't as aggressive as they were initially. Maybe because the memory had reached its natural biological lifespan. Just like human populations, crows pass off these warnings, and they eventually evolve into folklore that some believe and some don't. That's not instinct. That's what you call culture. So are crows really more like humans than we might think? In the animal kingdom, intelligence has evolved in all kinds of shapes and bodies. Dolphins echolocate, octopuses solve puzzles, primates strategize. But when it comes to raw, flexible, adaptable intelligence, scientists never thought to look at crows. For years, researchers believed these birds were clever, maybe even unusually clever. But no one expected what happened when thousands of hours of crow recordings were fed into a next-generation AI model. They expected to find and patterns related to basic behaviors, food calls, predator warnings, maybe some territorial sounds. However, the AI came back with something straight out of a sci-fi script. The model decoded crow calls and outlined their structure to confirm that these birds have in fact been tracking, analyzing, and watching humans in a way that modern society is not equipped to deal with. Another major experiment from the University of Auckland, inspired by Aesop's fable, showed that crows don't just use tools. They understand why a tool works. Given tubes with floating food, crows immediately chose the tubes where rocks would raise the water level. They ignored the useless ones. That's causal reasoning, the kind children learn around age 5. In Japan, cameras captured crows dropping nuts onto traffic lights, waiting for cars to crack them, then retrieving the food when the light turned red, timing the whole process perfectly. These aren't flukes. These are full-blown survival strategies. And if a creature can do all this, recognize human faces, teach their young about danger, use engineering logic, interpret signals, how can one assume that their vocal word is just random noise? The social structure of the crow population. One of the most groundbreaking discoveries came from cognitive psychologists who began testing crows with problems originally designed for apes and young children. The results were uncomfortable for anyone who believed humans sit comfortably at the top of the intelligence pyramid. In one study, crows were given a complex puzzle with multiple stages that needed to be solved in sequence. To everyone's shock, the birds didn't just stumble through it or rely on trial and error. They demonstrated something researchers call episodic-like memory. This means the crows remembered what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. This is the same trio of memory elements that form the foundation of human autobiographical memory. Then came a second blow. Crows were given a tool that was only useful the next day. Most animals, even intelligent ones, but indeed live in the present. If a tool has no immediate value, the animal ignores it. But the birds kept the tool. They carried it with them and saved it for a future task they had not yet seen. Scientists had to rewrite textbooks after that experiment because, until then, only humans and great apes were known to show that level of future planning and delayed gratification. Now, crows obviously don't come with subtitles, so researchers had to pair every sound with context. They gathered alarm calls during hawk attacks, soft coos between mates, group chatter near dumpsters, reactions to humans, territorial disagreements, and quiet signals at dusk. Each recording was then labeled with environmental details like who was nearby, what was happening, time of day, number of crows, presence of predators, and presence of humans. Then all of it was fed into a cutting-edge machine learning model, the same kind used in human speech recognition. Instantly, the AI detected the structure, syntax, and patterns inside patterns. Sure, they had typical warning and food calls, but scientists also found identity labels, and no one saw that coming. The identity label was one call, a repeated pattern that appeared only when a man in a red hat walked into a certain area. Days later, the same man walked in, and the same call was repeated. So, the crows weren't just recognizing that a man was walking nearby, they were recognizing that one specific man walked nearby on different occasions. The results were very similar to the university experiment and essentially verified its findings through more data. Now, when scientists played that call sound to unrelated crows, they reacted instantly, as if they would if the man were physically present. And once that door opened, everything spilled out. As the AI decoded deeper layers, a trend became obvious. Humans dominate crow conversation more than predators, more than food, even more than each other. Some might even call it gossip, and that won't be wrong. The AI model discovered that crows have certain calls that are meant to warn each other about specific humans, people carrying nets or weapons, signal aggressive individuals, broadcast safe humans, and even announce new humans walking into areas. Scientists sent in a man carrying a long stick and made the same man return empty-handed a few hours later and noticed the difference in calls. This helped them determine that this wasn't about the man. It was about his intent, and the fact that crows could recognize that proves that they are intelligent beings aware of everything going on around them. That level of behavioral interpretation is extremely rare in the animal kingdom, but it doesn't stop there. Crows spread information miles away through relay calling networks. One alarm call in one neighborhood can ripple across an entire city by evening. If you upset one crow, hundreds have the ability to know within minutes. But then again, if you feed one crow, hundreds will know about that too. So these creatures have a way to distinguish between the good and the bad, which even most humans can't manage. Here's where things get strange. When researchers analyzed thousands of crow calls, the AI began picking up a category of communication that didn't match anything scientists had labeled before. The crows were actually conducting meetings. At dusk, groups of crows gather in what scientists long called roosting behavior. But the AI revealed those gatherings weren't silent or random. They were filled with structured vocal sequences, repeated across recordings from different regions. It was the first sign of multi-crow communication, not just individuals reacting to the world, but flocks briefing each other. The AI picked out sequences that correlated with events that happened earlier in the day, interactions with specific humans, the presence of predators, new food sources, changes in territory, and threats that needed to be shared. It was almost like listening to a neighborhood watch meeting, except in the sky. Different crows chimed in with slightly different tones, and the AI noticed a rhythm to the back and forth. One bird broadcasts, another adds detail, another confirms, and then the group goes quiet. The humans, of course, were a major agenda item during these meetings, but the part that really shifted the scientific world came next. Crows and their human-like behavior. For years, we assumed bird calls were functional, alarm or no alarm, food or no food. But when the AI model zoomed deeper into the sonic structure, it detected emotional coding, subtle changes in pitch, vibration, rhythm, and duration that carried meaning far beyond simple signals. It is suggested that these birds have emotions too. For example, after a crow's death, the AI detected a unique low-frequency pattern and categorized it as grief, or at least something that strongly resembles it. And this matched what scientists already knew about crow funerals. Dozens gather silently, approach the body one by one, and inspect the surroundings to understand what happened. The birds turn into full-blown detectives who would work to figure out what happened to the deceased and then warn each other against it to avoid the same fate. If there's one behavior that separates crows from almost every other bird, it's this one. These gatherings turn into briefings about death itself, and these funeral conclusions ripple out into the wider crow network. When the AI mapped how these funeral signals spread across different flocks, it discovered something chilling. The grief call is not identical everywhere. It has local variations or dialects as humans know them. Each group shaped the tone slightly differently, the same way different human communities shape their rituals, prayers, or moments of silence. One of the most surprising findings was how juveniles behave at funerals, though. Younger crows who are still learning the rules of the flock pay exceptionally close attention during these occasions. They actively memorize the location, surroundings, threat patterns, and calls being used by adults. After funerals, AI detected that juveniles started using new call variations they had never used before, almost like children learning a new word after hearing adults discuss something serious. That wasn't where it stopped, though. When food was found or shared, the AI registered short, rapid-fire chirps with high-frequency spikes. Not generic happiness, but social excitement, where they told each other that something was good, that it was safe. The patterns were consistent across recordings from different states and different flocks. That means that this is shared vocabulary that several flocks of crows can understand and respond to. And then there are the disagreements. During disputes over territory, mating, or hierarchy, the AI noticed calls with rising pitch patterns, almost like two birds talking over each other, escalating in speed and tone. These patterns always accompanied physical posturing or wing movements. The calls were debates. The crows were making emotional cases to others, and they were also being understood and responded to. That's something scientists once believed only humans, dolphins, and primates could do. However, once all these layers were peeled back, scientists realized that crow societies have depth, nuance, and feelings woven into their language. Up until this point, everything the AI uncovered could still fit into humans' understanding of animal communication. It's strange. Sure, but maybe not that unbelievable? But then the AI stumbled onto something no one expected, something that doesn't fit neatly into any biological category. That is commentary, something disturbingly close to opinions. When researchers zoomed in on a subset of recordings, they noticed a recurring vocal pattern that didn't appear during danger, feeding, or travel. They had no idea what it meant. The structure was too long, too organized, too internally consistent to be random noise. At first, analysts suspected a mistake, maybe corrupted audio, overlapping sounds, or interference. But the more the AI mapped it, the stranger it got. This vocal pattern appeared across multiple territories in different states, separated by days or weeks, but with the same structure every single time. This was the moment scientists realized the crows weren't just sending information to each other, they were sending perspectives too. This was the moment the research stopped feeling like a biology project and started feeling like eavesdropping on another civilization. When the AI zoomed into a strange cluster of calls that had shown up repeatedly across different regions, the structure immediately stood out. These vocal patterns were longer than typical alarm calls, more organized than social chatter, and far too consistent to be random noise. Analysts initially thought the audio was corrupted or overlapping, two calls blending into one. Whatever this category was, it was spreading across territories the way a thought or rumor spreads, not the way instinctive calls do. The AI kept flagging these sequences whenever a crow witnessed human behavior that didn't fall neatly into danger or safe. It happened when a person acted unpredictably. It happened when someone lingered near nests without causing direct harm. It happened when humans displayed unfamiliar or confusing behavior. The crow wasn't simply announcing the presence of the human. The tone, rhythm, and internal structure of the sequence suggested something closer to saying that this human is acting strangely, or that this human is unpredictable. It was the closest thing to a narrative the AI had ever seen in an animal call. Once that door opened, the implications became impossible to ignore. If crows were creating these commentary calls about humans, then the birds weren't just exchanging information, they were exchanging perspectives. They were forming collective judgments about the people living around them, and those judgments were influencing the behavior of the entire flock. Suddenly, long-standing mysteries made sense. Why do crows mob only certain people who walk through a neighborhood, even if those people weren't the ones who wronged them? Why do some humans receive gifts from crows they've never fed? Why do certain flocks completely avoid one yard, but comfortably forage in another, only meters away? And that means somewhere, in a tree above your street, you may already be the topic of a conversation you'll never get to hear. The Crow Network. If you've ever seen a crow react before the threat even arrives, that might not be a coincidence. It might be the network at work. For years, scientists believed crow vocalizations were mostly local, small territories, small flocks, and small distances. But when AI began analyzing recordings from neighborhoods miles apart, a strange pattern emerged. Calls that originated in one location were appearing in another hours later, sometimes with tiny modifications, sometimes almost identical. It was the first sign that crows weren't just talking, they were transmitting information in bulk. The AI model noticed that crows use specific call sequences that travel farther, carry clearer, and repeat more consistently. They weren't alarms, and they weren't social chatter. They were broadcasts. And when researchers mapped them against timestamps and locations, a hidden system began to surface. Crows were relaying information across cities, the way humans forward messages across group chats. One bird sees a threat. It sends out a specific sequence. Birds in the next block repeat it. That same pattern is echoed by a flock near a schoolyard. Minutes later, crows perched on power lines a mile away are already shifting their perches, adjusting their routes, preparing for something they haven't even seen. The AI called these relays communication corridors, or invisible highways made of sound. But what startled scientists the most wasn't the speed. The calls weren't distorted or mutated the way most animal signals degrade over distance. They were almost perfect replicas, as if certain birds had taken on the role of amplifiers. Individuals who, for reasons still unknown, broadcast information farther, louder, and more clearly than the rest. These signal amplifiers weren't always the strongest or the oldest, as one might assume. They were simply effective. Their calls cut through city noise, rain, and wind better than the others, and the network evolved around them. Birds positioned themselves strategically, the way humans place cell towers, creating a living grid that transmitted threats, food sources, human behavior, and even the emotional tone of gatherings. In one study, a crow mobbed a person carrying a tool near a university. Within 45 minutes, crows nearly 2 miles away were reacting to the same call sequence, despite never having seen that human. This is what makes urban crow societies full-fledged communities that are always self-updating and self-correcting. It's almost like a citywide information infrastructure powered by birds. Then, the question became, do crows understand intention? If crows alter their behavior based on what the human might do next, instead of what they have done before, that means they anticipate these actions. In neuroscience, this ability is a hallmark of theory of mind, the capacity to understand that another being has thoughts, desires, intentions, and perspectives different from your own. For decades, only 3 species have been considered serious candidates: humans, great apes, and dolphins. Crows are on their way to join that list, though. When the AI went deeper, another layer emerged. Crows modulated their calls based on emotional cues, not from other birds, but also from humans. Heart rate changes, body tension, subtle shifts in pace. All of these created different call structures. When a human approached calmly, crows produced neutral tracking calls. If the human was anxious or upset, the calls shifted into uncertainty signals. If the human displayed aggression or irritation, even without direct action, crows escalated into intent warning patterns. This means that crows have ways of reading human moods. And once again, this wasn't restricted to individuals. It spread across groups. A crow that detected emotional volatility in a human could influence the behavior of dozens of birds who had never seen that person before. Crows don't just know who you are. They know who you might become. That's what the scientists say. These birds can guess whether you're safe or dangerous, and they can adjust their entire strategy around the version of you they predict. This means their entire communication system is not reactive. It's predictive and adaptive. All things considered, we're not dealing with advanced birds anymore. We're dealing with a parallel intelligence, one that has been watching us for far longer than we can even imagine. But the most unsettling discovery came from long-term social tracking. Using lightweight GPS tags, researchers mapped crow movements across months. They found that certain pairs of crows consistently traveled together, not for food, nesting, or protection, but simply because they preferred the company. They perched together at night, roosted near each other in different seasons, and called out for one another when separated. When one crow was injured, its companion stayed close by, bringing food and producing calls AI categorized as emotional reassurance. Before this, only humans, elephants, dolphins, and a few apes had demonstrated knowing and understanding friendships. Now crows are on that list too. The more researchers mapped crow movements, the clearer a new picture became. Crows weren't randomly scattered across cities. They were forming clusters that resembled human districts, and these could exist around a highway, another around a schoolyard, another around a market. And each cluster appeared to exhibit different behavior. Near hospitals, crows became unusually calm around sirens and chaotic human activity, almost as if they had adapted. Near industrial zones, crows showed heightened sensitivity to chemical odors and sounds the human ear couldn't detect. Near ports, crows learned to recognize shipping trucks, loading cranes, and predictable human rhythms. And near garbage dumps, they developed complex systems for monitoring when new food arrived, which trucks were reliable, and which areas were dangerous. These birds, who are usually dismissed as brainless creatures, are playing a large role within society without humans even knowing. But what's more fascinating is how crow intelligence is affected by human population. What if cities, with their noise, danger, and opportunity, have accelerated crow evolution the same way they have accelerated human civilization? AI models comparing rural and urban crow calls showed clear divergence. Urban crows had more complex communication structures, a wider emotional vocabulary, and more commentary sequences. Rural crows, while still intelligent, used simpler calls and had fewer identity tags. In other words, cities make crows smarter at an unimaginable speed. For most of history, humans didn't think twice about the birds circling overhead. But now, they have to be ready to understand crows and even coexist with them, given what might be coming next. And that brings us to an uncomfortable crossroads that scientists are facing. What now? For the first time, researchers are openly discussing whether this intelligence can be used to our advantage, not in a sinister way, but in the way humans form alliances, build relationships, and integrate species into the urban world in a way that benefits both sides. Because once you accept that crows are effectively running a citywide surveillance and communication system, could humans actually partner with them? Could we train crows to identify threats to the environment, to track pollution changes, to signal early warnings during disasters? Could urban planners learn from crow communication corridors to design smarter sensor networks? Could conservationists work with crow populations to monitor declining ecosystems in real time? What might have sounded like pure science fiction is close to becoming a reality, with everything that AI has helped scientists uncover. Some scientists have brought up an even bolder idea, not using crows as tools, but using AI as a translator. A way to finally understand what birds have been saying about us for centuries. And maybe, one day, a way for us to talk back. If AI can decode emotional tone, identity markers, intent-matching sequences, and commentary patterns, then we're not far from building the first true translation interface between humans and another species. It won't be perfect. It might not even feel like language, the way we define it. But it will be communication nonetheless. And once that barrier breaks, humanity can enter a new chapter, not just with crows, but the entire animal kingdom. Crows are only the beginning. The future of coexistence with animals. Once scientists realized that machine learning could slice through animal sounds the same way it slices through human speech, the floodgates opened. Suddenly, researchers weren't just decoding birds. They were exposing sophisticated communication systems across the entire animal kingdom, systems that have been running for millions of years without humans ever noticing. And as it turns out, AI has already begun revealing the answers. For decades, marine biologists believed that whale songs were long, dramatic sound patterns tied to migration and mating. Beautiful, but simple, at their core. Then a group of researchers fed years of humpback whale recordings into a deep learning speech model similar to the ones used to analyze human dialects. The result stunned everyone. The AI detected a structure along with grammar-like rules and repeated phrases that changed depending on context. Some signals even resembled something close to names, since the patterns were produced only when certain individuals were involved. In Africa, researchers placed vibrational sensors beneath elephant pathways, feeding their infrasonic rumbles into AI models. These low-frequency sounds travel miles through the ground, and the AI found that elephants have specific calls announcing births, identifying family members, warning about humans, and even coordinating movements long before humans can see the herd. They don't just communicate, they collaborate and plan. When a poacher is detected miles away, elephants warn each other through the ground itself. Even honeybees, creatures that are often dismissed as instinct-driven, shocked scientists when their waggle dances were fed into computer vision algorithms. AI learned that the angle and speed of the dance aren't just directional codes for food sources. Subtle variations communicate danger levels, hive stress, food quality, and even bee opinions on whether a direction is worth exploring. Not to mention, bees hold debates, literal arguments, inside their hive until consensus is reached. Safe to say, once we created machines capable of recognizing structure, emotion, intent, and identity in sound, the illusion of human uniqueness shattered in real time. The story of the crows is a whirlwind of intelligence, mystery, evolution, and a reality we were never prepared to confront. Whether you see them as allies, silent observers, or a parallel civilization, we've only just begun to understand. There's no denying their impact, or what AI has revealed about them. What do you think about this new chapter between humans, animals, and machines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.